So this has been an exciting month here at Microcenter since we have the exclusive Ryzen 5 7600X3D, and we wanted to feature that bundle in a build. This will be a budget build, and at the center of that will be our AMD Ryzen 5 CPU bundle. So you get the AMD Ryzen 5 7600X3D. That's going to be paired with 32 gigabytes of G.Skill DDR5 RAM. That's the Flare X5, and that's DDR5 6000 RAM. And then you have the ASUS TUF Gaming B650 Plus Wi-Fi motherboard. All of that together is the center of the bundle. And then we paired that off with an AMD Radeon RX 7700 XT. This has 12 gigabytes of VRAM, and this is going to be a really great card to pair off with this CPU. All in all, this is going to be a great gaming build. I also paired this off with an air cooler for the CPU since it's not going to run that hot. It's just a single tower. This is the PureRock 2 from Be Quiet, and this is kind of just an all-black air cooler, very simple. We also have a 750 watt modular power supply from PowerSpec, and then we also have a 1 terabyte P3 Plus from Crucial. Now this is a Gen 4 SSD, but frankly, it's going to be more than enough for what you need. So altogether, everything here on the table comes to roughly $1,000. I think it was about $1,050 or so in that range, but still, this is going to be a great build. And I wanted to give a special shout out to this Montech case that we're using for today's build. This is the King 95. We got this in blue. I actually really like this blue color. And as you can see, it has this curved panel, so you can get this really nice kind of curved panel look. I think this is going to look really sick. So I'm actually really looking forward to putting this together. I have this cool 3D printed RAM holder that I made. I found the file on printables, but it's kind of nice for just keeping your RAM staged somewhere, so it's not just laying around haphazardly. Always keep the manuals handy. Sometimes I even have to look at them just to double check, how something connects. A lot of different brands have their own kind of unique, call them quirks, right? Where they do things maybe slightly different than other brands. So it's always good to just double check the manual. This is the ASUS TUF Gaming B650 Plus Wi-Fi motherboard. So this is a really good motherboard for this bundle. It's going to pair perfectly with the Ryzen 5 7600X3D. I got to test the CPU out a lot, and I have to say it runs really, really well. 7600X3D. Right in, match up the notches. Just going to bring the handle down. Pops off. So SSD is going to go right here. And this one has Q latches, so you can see there's a little M2 screw loose in the box here, but we're not going to need that. So here is our Crucial P3 Plus 1 terabyte SSD, NVMe M2 SSD. So we can just get this in, and then this pushes right down. Q latch is just a little turn, and you just match up the screws. One of them is going to go right over the Q latch, other one's going to go on the side here. A2, B2, it's going to be those slots for our 2 sticks. Some coolers will take advantage of this pre-installed bracket here that you can use, but we're not going to be using that today. So now the back plate here, we're still going to leave this on. It's still going to take advantage of the back plate. All right, so you put on the spacers. These brackets are going to go on just like that. You do want to pay attention to the clearance of the RAM sticks with, the towers and the fans and all of that. It can get a little cramped around there. Fortunately, this is just a single tower with a single fan, so you're going to get plenty of clearance with this guy. When you're using a lower powered CPU like the 7600X3D, there's a lot of really good budget air coolers on the market that you can take advantage of. Just pops right off. There's just one screw on the back. This just pops off. So this is the part that has the curved glass. And this is tempered glass, by the way. There's a little plastic strip here that I'm just going to peel off. What I like about this motherboard is the I/O plate pre-installed. Always makes life way easier. There we go. Look at that. Slides right in. Easy peasy. I always, always, always love it when they give you these little boxes with all of the screws and everything laid out. So the fact that this case comes like this, oh, this is great. There's a curved mesh that you could swap out. So instead of having the glass on the front, you could have this so you get more airflow out of it. I'm just gonna opt for the curved glass altogether. So I always kind of like to start in the corners. All right, so motherboard's all set. Motherboard cables, good to go right here. There we go. And then I'll just feed this into the slot back there. Same thing for the motherboard. I'll just start to feed this into the back. Basically, there's this little crossbar that's going to go underneath, and that's just going to push it down onto the brackets, and that's it. This has the thermal paste pre-installed. So in terms of what I have to do, it's pretty easy. Fan's going to be on this side, air is going to be going that way. Oh, that'll just rest right on top. Get a couple turns on this side just to get it in place. Fortunately, the fan just pops right off, so this will be quick and easy. And I can just put this right in, alternate sides so it puts down pressure evenly. There we go. So this cable I can just tuck in underneath. There's just one screw here, pops right out. So you take these two screws off, this hinge goes like that. That's actually pretty nice. That makes life really easy. It's just gonna go right over here. I put a couple zip ties on the case cables because I know that at least this run of it is I'm not gonna change that much. I can already tell it has mounting points for 2.5-inch SSDs that you can put easily. Definitely lets air through. So if you put a rad on this side. So AMD Radeon 7700 XT, got 12 gigabytes of VRAM on this guy. Pretty straightforward, just gotta take out the screws over here for the slots. Looking pretty good. So I can just take these cables, I'm just gonna tuck them in real good. Look at that. And don't forget, it gives you a lot of room to sort of just upgrade down the line. And this case really does give you everything you need to sort of just add so many extras. All right, so everything's all set. Next thing I'll do is get Windows installed, and then we'll do a couple of benches. So everything's all done. I have Windows installed, got a bunch of games installed, already did some benches, but I did make one quick last minute addition. I wanted to actually add a couple of fans because there's no fans in this case. So I figured let's throw a couple in. So that's the thing about doing these budget builds. Sometimes when you're trying to save a couple of bucks, it sort of creates a little extra work. So these fans, I'm just running them individually to the fan headers. So that means I have to take advantage of the different fan headers all around the case. Second fan I ran back, down and around. So that's actually running to the header here. And then there's one more header here. So this cable, I'm probably just gonna have run in, right back out, and then hit that header. All right, all three fans are in. They're going to be blowing the air right out of the case. They're all set up. So I have one header here, one down here, one over here. Everything's all good. So I'm really happy with the way that this build came out. The three fans that I added, I think definitely helped a lot with the airflow. For the most part, this performed really, really well for 1080 gaming, but we did also try 1440 and 4K as well. So let's start with Cinebench. Single core had a score of 1,701, with multi-core at a score of 12,902. And then we did 3D Mark. First we did Time Spy at 1080, so that was a score of 14,554. And then we did Steel Nomad at 1080, and that had a score of 3,272. So for Cyberpunk, we did 1080, 1440, and 4K with the Ray Tracing Ultra preset. So at 1080, about 65 frames per second average, 1440, 51 frames per second average, and then 4K about 34 frames per second average. But then on the 4K resolution, we turned off the ray tracing, but still left the Ultra preset and had a 64 frames per second average. So that's comparable to the 1080 with ray tracing on. All of that is to say that ray tracing is really going to be something that's going to push this card to its limit. So if you can live without ray tracing, I would suggest keeping it off, and you'll definitely get better frame rates with some of your games. Same thing with F123, we had the ray tracing on for that one. So 1080, we had 93 frames per second average, 1440, we had 62 frames per second average, and then 4K, 33 frames per second average. We also did another bench for Returnal at all three resolutions as well. So 1080, you had 112 frames per second, 1440, 86 frames per second, and 4K, you had about 50 frames per second. So all of that is to say that 1080, rock solid. 1440, you're gonna do pretty well. 4K might be hit or miss depending on the game, but you might be able to hit that 60 frames per second average for most single player games that you're gonna wanna play in 4K anyway. And you can hit that with ray tracing off, and you might want to make some tweaks to your settings. I like doing benches with the presets just to see with the absolute highest settings, and then you can kind of figure it out, everything in between in terms of performance. But overall, I'm really happy with the way that this build came out. And remember that the 7600 X3D bundle is at the core of this build. And you can only get the 7600 X3D at your local microcenter. And remember, if you don't have a microcenter near you, to comment hashtag I want a microcenter near me.